Here's how I'd like to understand Theodor Herzl's vision for Zionism. Herzl, as you all probably know, linked Zionism to anti-Semitism. Somehow, in his view, Zionism is the true reaction, the true answer to anti-Semitism. But here's the thing, Herzl wasn't a labor Zionist. He wasn't a Mapainik. He wasn't a part of the school of thought represented and articulated later on by David Ben-Gurion. According to Herzl, Zionism is not there in order to save us from anti-Semitism. It's not a safe refuge that will save us from hatred. That's not what Zionism is about, according to Herzl. According to Herzl, what Zionism is about, it's even a more radical movement. It's not an attempt to guard us from anti-Semitism. It's an attempt to cancel anti-Semitism. It will transform the entire emotional structure of Gentiles and therefore end hundreds of years of conflict between Jews and Gentiles. That was the purpose of Zionism. I know today that might seem naive. I know today it seems like, well, Zionism didn't cancel the conflict. It changed the conflict. We used to be in conflict with the Christian world, and all Zionism managed to do was what? Was shift it, transform it. And now we're in a conflict with the Muslim world. Quite an achievement. But in Herzl's eyes, he had a more optimistic vision. His vision was, and it's inspired by Hegelian philosopher of the 19th century, Hegelian philosophers, that humanity is a family. Imagine humanity as mishpacha. And if humanity is a family, it's a family of nations. And therefore, the only way to be a part of the family of nations is to organize yourself as a nation. And once we organize ourselves as a nation, we will be a part of the family of nations, and as a result, an organic part of humanity. As one of the interpreters of Herzl put it, the purpose of Zionism is to end the exile from humanity, not the exile from Eretz Israel, the exile from humanity. That's an exciting vision for Zionism. Normalizing Jewish history, ending the conflict, ending the exile from humanity. About the same time, another thinker had a different vision for Zionism. His name was Rabbi Avraham Yitzchak Cohen Kook, one of the greatest philosophers and mystics of the 20th century. A giant. He had a different vision. This was his vision. He writes an article called Eretz Yisrael. In this article he says, the opening line is, Eretz Yisrael, einena kinyan chitzoni le'umah. I'll try to explain this. The land of Israel is not something that belongs to the Jewish people. It is also inspired by Hegelian philosophy. What does it mean that the land of Israel, does it not belong to the Jewish people? This for Western people is hard to understand. Many of us in the West, we see our location as an answer to the question where we are. But many people throughout history have a different intuition when it comes to location. It doesn't answer the question where we are, it answers the question who we are. As the poet Chernichovsky put it, Ha'adam eino ela tavnit nof moladato. A human being is a reflection of the view of his homeland. It's who we are. And Rav Kook took this very seriously. According to the Rav Kook, every nation is an organism. He was in that worldview. And every organism has a soul and it has a body. The soul of a nation is its culture. Shakespeare is an expression of the soul of the British, which are having some problems lately. Pascal, Descartes, they're reflections of the soul of the French, which might be also having some problems lately. The Talmud, the Zohar, the Guide for the Perplexed, they're reflections of the Jewish soul, of the soul of the Jewish nation. But every nation has a soul. It also has the body. England is the body of the British organism. Italy, the territory, is the body of the Italian national organism. And Eretz Israel is the body of that being called Am Yisrael. We have a soul as reflected in our rich culture, and we have our body, which is the land of Israel. According to this analysis, what does it mean that when Jews are in exile? creating magnificent culture, but not in their land. What does Jews in exile mean according to this Kookian analysis? You're a spirit separated from its body. You're a ghost. In light of this radical analysis, what is Zionism then? Zionism is the Jewish spirit returning to its body. It's the Jewish people becoming alive again. It's the awakening of the dead. So according to Herzl, Zionism is about the Jews returning to humanity. According to the Rav Kook, it's about Jews returning to themselves. We have two exciting visions for Zionism. One is about acceptance. The second is about land. What happened to both Zionisms? Both Zionisms played out throughout the history of the Jewish state, especially after the Six-Day War. Because after the Six-Day War, after the Israeli army in 6 days more than triples the land of Israel and returns our forces to historic Israel, to Bethlehem, to Hebron, to Jerusalem, to Shechem. So the Rav Kook's vision awakened. Here we are, back in our historic body. Here we are, with the ability to tap into our historic memories, to relive, to return the Jewish spirit to the Jewish body. But also, in a very interesting way, Herzl's disciples wake up again. And they realize, well, this land, we have Sinai, and Sinai is an asset that the Egyptians want. And the West Bank is an asset of the Jordanians. And the Golan Heights of the Syrians. How can we leverage this tremendous victory? Not to return the people to its land, but to return our people to humanity. We could trade all this land for peace, and we'll have peace with the Arab world. We'll be finally really accepted in the Western world, and Herzl's vision will fulfill itself. So for the past 49 years, ever since the Six-Day War, the vision of Rav Kook and the vision of Herzl are clashing. How do we leverage the victory? To settle the land or to trade the land? To bring people back to its body or to bring the people back to humanity? I gotta say, I'm not sure everything I said till now is so accurate. Because Israel is not only about ideas, it's also about events. 1987, we had an Intifada. Intifada means this is a Palestinian nation trying to shake off a nation that's controlling it. To shake it off. That's what it means. And Israelis start serving 30, 40 days in Miluim, doing their reserve duty in Tulkarem. I myself have memories from Tulkarem, from chasing a little Palestinian boy that was doing a spray paint on the wall. And we didn't know what to do because we saw him spraying on the wall. My commander had an idea. How about the Jeep will go into the small street where he is, he'll run away, and we'll catch him on the other side. This was a very sophisticated operation. We're celebrating 40 years for Entebbe, but that was nothing compared to the sophistication we had to perform to catch a 7-year-old Palestinian with spray paint on the wall. And guess what? We caught him. It was a success. I actually felt it that way. But years later, you reflect on those moments and many similar moments, and you realize, what the hell are we doing there? And many Israeli soldiers and civilians and Jews around the world realize that the West Bank might be filled with our historic memories. But there are historic memories. But they're also populated by another nation, a different people. And soldiers that realize that we want to go to the army to guard our nation, and we find ourselves policing another nation. And the first Intifada was a real blow. Before the first Intifada, 20% of Israelis were for an independent Palestinian state. After the first Intifada, 65% of Israelis are for an independent Palestinian state. The first Intifada shattered the romantic vision of settling the land of Israel, the romantic vision of the Jewish soul returning to the Jewish body. We realized maybe big ideas don't work in real realities. The second Intifada comes along. Now what I want to share with you here, I want to share with you a perspective of about 60-70% of Israelis. The Israelis in the broad sense of the center. Natalie said I'm going to introduce a vision for Zionism. I want to introduce the perplexities of Zionism regarding 70% of Israelis. The second Intifada comes along. And what was troubling for many Israelis about the second Intifada is the timing of the second Intifada. We all remember the second Intifada. It wasn't an easy time. It starts in 2000. Over 1,100 Israelis were murdered in the second Intifada. Now, I'm showing an Israeli perspective now, okay? And they were murdered, as you know, because of an attack of many suicide bombs. But the problem was the timing. The timing that it started, it was 2 months after the negotiations between Ehud Barak and Yasser Arafat in Camp David. And this is how Clinton understood the results. Dennis Ross understood it. Ehud Barak understood it. And majority of Israelis understand it. There's counter-narratives, but I'm sharing with you the perspective of most Israelis and mainstream Americans. Ehud Barak offered Yasser Arafat evacuation of almost all the West Bank, all of Gaza, partition of Jerusalem, and a compromise on Temple Mount. Bill Clinton writes in his biography, this was the most generous offer an Israeli prime minister ever offered a Palestinian or will ever offer a Palestinian. Dennis Ross writes along the same lines. Ehud Barak comes back. Oh, and Arafat said no. Not only did he say no, he didn't come back with a counter offer. And then the second Intifada explodes. This is how most Israelis understand it. Most Israelis, the timing of second Intifada led many Israelis to the following thought. This violence is not a result of the occupation because it started after we offered to end the occupation. It's not a result of the settlements. It was after we offered to end the settlements. The second Intifada was a horrible blow for the Israeli left. We entered a trust deficit. Now I want to try to put this together. How do Israelis look like post two Intifadas? How do these two ideas were playing out so nicely? How do they look like after two Intifadas? Something like this. After two Intifadas, most Israelis, not all Israelis, feel that we cannot control the Palestinians. And sadly, we cannot trust them either. That's the paradoxical conclusion that many of us came out with from the two Intifadas. And here's now where the new Israeli consensus is starting to lean. 60 to 70% of Israelis feel like the occupation of the Palestinian people has to end. It has to end because this situation is not sustainable. And if it continues, Israel has no future. It's isolating us diplomatically. It's threatening us demographically. And it's distorting us ethically. We have to end the occupation. But if we end the occupation, as we all can see, the Middle East is exploding. There's 14 million refugees, not from the Middle East, but in the Middle East. Countries are collapsing. The most brutal forms of terrorism are erupting all over the place. And the fear is that if we evacuate the West Bank, so all these chaotic, brutal forces will enter the West Bank. We might find ISIS in the West Bank. We might find Boko Haram in the West Bank. We might find Hezbollah in the West Bank. We might find Jabhat. I heard a lecture, so I know all the lists. Yeah, Jabhat. And as an Israeli general said a few days ago, and it will probably be all of them together. And if we have the chaos of the Middle East in the West Bank is just overlooking Tel Aviv, and that means that Israel is an undefendable country. We shrink into undefendable borders, and that threatens the life and security and the stability of our future. Therefore, we cannot... Okay, so here's my conclusion. My conclusion that we have to leave the West Bank, and we can't leave the West Bank. And that's my solution. Let's go do that, okay? Will you vote for me? For that great idea of leaving, but never leaving the West Bank? Well, you see, this perplexity that I'm sharing with you, this is the perplexity of 60 to 70% of Israelis. The understanding that we have to end the control of the Palestinian people, but we can't trust what will happen after we leave the West Bank. This is a perplexity shared by between 60 and 70% of Israelis. And you know what we Israelis did when this happened? I think this is what we did. For 49 years, at least, if you ask an Israeli, what's your opinion about constitution? Why don't you have a constitution? Why is the relationship between religion and state in Israel so distorted? Why don't you deal directly with the economic and social problems that Israel has? So you always get like the following answer. You know, you're right, these are very serious problems. We have to deal with them. You know when we'll deal with them? After we solve the conflict. And as a result, we were waiting for the conflict to end to deal with so many other problems. We were lending other people political capital to deal with other problems because we were so focused on the conflict. And as a result, the conflict was holding all other problems, like the problem that Dalia is going to mention, our relationship with our minorities. The conflict was holding all our problems as hostages. If there was ever a protest for social justice, for religion and state, you'd get like 4 people to come. But at protests to evacuate settlements or to guard settlements for peace and war, hundreds of thousands of people would come. You see, the conflict had a monopoly over Israeli political passion until something happened. Summer 2011. Summer 2011, when hundreds of thousands of Israelis left their homes, moved into tents, passionately protested, saying, Ha'am doresh, tzedek chevrati, the people are demanding social justice. Suddenly, it was clear that the conflict lost its monopoly over our political passion. Ironically, we thought we'll start dealing with other issues after we solve the conflict. I think Israelis started to deal with other issues after they realized that maybe we can't solve the conflict. Thank you very much.
So as Micah said, the conflict has been holding many of the other issues internally in Israel hostage. But that's begun to change. And so I'd like to introduce Dalia. Dr. Dalia Fadila is president of Al-Qasemi Engineering and Science College, and she served in the past 8 years as provost of Al-Qasemi Teacher Training College, an Arab college of education in Israel. Dr. Fadila established private schools for teaching English called Q schools that propose a unique approach to teaching and learning English. Dr. Fadila is also currently a faculty member at the IDC Interdisciplinary Center in Herzliya, a member of the Governmental Civil Service Higher Education Committee, a fellow of the Taub Center, and a member of President Rivlin's Committee for Education for a Shared Life. So she's a little bit busy. Thank you. Dalia.
So first of all, for you not to be freaking out this morning, it's Al-Qasemi and not Al-Qasemi. We don't want, So my presentation this morning is about narratives, the absence of narratives, the construction of narratives, and the counter-narratives. And it all starts with my own personal narrative which I selfishly enough believe as a reflection, Micah, of the absence of narrative, construction of narrative, lack of narrative, and counter-narrative. And so, people ask me, how do you define yourself? And I start with an Arab, not quite. 10 years ago, when my husband and I were visiting the pyramids in Cairo, when it was possible to do that, there were two gates, a gate for tourists, which is like 5 guineas, which is like 5 shekels, and a gate for Palestinians and locals, and immediately you go for the cheapest. You go for the Palestinian one, and it was interesting to observe my husband, who has a very much an Arab Muslim name. His name is Abd Is-Salam. I was hiding behind him because of my name, Dalia, trying with his blue Israeli passport to convince the Egyptian guards at the Palestinian and locals gate that we are actually Arab, Palestinians, Muslims living in Israel. We ended up paying the 5 shekels, the 5 guineas, going into the tourist. My husband thinking how frustrated he is for not being recognized as an Arab Muslim Palestinian, and I was thinking, wow, wonderful material for my next book. So it's an Arab and not quite an Arab, depending where you are, who you are, what you want to achieve at that moment. I go next for Palestinian. The same goes for Palestinian. Here I feel Palestinian. When I go to Jenin, when I go to Ramallah, when I go to Tulkarem, I feel less Palestinian. I feel that directed at me thoughts and looks of, how dare you call yourself a Palestinian when you're enjoying the luxury of democratic life in Israel? So I am Palestinian. I have a Palestinian heritage. My father, my mother, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, all born in Palestine before the 1948 and continued to be in their homes, on their lands after 1948. When I go into being a Muslim, again, to see how Muslim women are starting to dress up these days, you find a combination of hijab and skinny jeans. And that's a kind of interesting combination. I want it to be Israeli, I want it to be Muslim, and a kind of, I think, an invention of Islam in Israel, where it is very different from Islam in a Muslim or an Arab country around the Middle East or in the world. When it comes to being an Israeli, I am an Israeli. I acknowledge being an Israeli, and I accept I want to continue being an Israeli. And I'm raising 3 kids. One of them is 18, and he's preparing himself to go into university. And unlike other people in my community who would like to send their young sons and daughters to access higher education in a Jordanian university or a West Bank university, my son and I and my husband and my daughter also would like to access education and employment and prestige and progress within an Israeli institution. So I guess I am Israeli, and I'm bringing up my kids to an active, a practical or pragmatic kind of Israeliness. When you are a woman and entering into this space of being and not being at the same time, a clash of you at each momentum, at each variable of your identity, and you think, you know what? It is either I am all of these or none of these, which is very convenient, or some of these, and unless I write a bestseller about it, it's better be something good coming out of it. Now, what I described till now, it's not only my personal problem. Perhaps I am one of the only Arab, Muslim, Israeli, Palestinian women inside Israel who try to articulate it into some nice structured chaos. But this is not really my personal problem only. This is a problem of the community. A community of a 20% of the state of Israel, 1,600,000 people living inside Israel, Palestinian heritage, Arabs, citizens of the State of Israel, since the establishment of the State of Israel, they have been struggling with identity variables. If you take 5 Arabs in Israel and ask them, how do you define yourself? They'll give you at least 10 definitions. Ready? Palestinian, a Palestinian in Israel, an Israeli Palestinian, an Israel, it sounds like an oxymoron, I know. An Arab, an Israeli, Israeli Arab, Israeli, an Arab living in Israel, an Arab of Israel, an Arab in Israel. Each time you change the hyphenation or the preposition, you are belonging to a different approach to being an Israeli and to being an Israel. Sometimes it's a geographical terminology, political terminology. It is Arabs of the green line, inside the green line, Arabs of 48, historical, Arabs of the Nakba, not Arabs of 67, and so on and on and on. And these terminologies go. Now, this ongoing 60-year plus of ambivalence inside, from within the heart and being an existence of the Arab minority in Israel is being intensified by the policy of the government of the State of Israel as well. The policy or lack of policy, or the policy of lack of policy, whether this 20% of the community is part of the lively organism of the State of Israel, or they are the fifth column, or the enemy from within, or the backyard of the society of Israeli. Are they part of a vision of an Israeli society? Is there a vision of an Israeli society? And all of these inside ambivalences coming into the definition, meeting the outside State of Israel ambivalence, maybe intentional ambivalence, maybe constructive ambivalence to what it means to have a minority within a majority state, help me, in a way, define a kind of a dual complexity theory that I started to speak about in recent years. We're confused about who we are, and that is because we're still on a waiting hold for Palestine to be liberated, decided only after there is a two-state solution whether we want to continue to be Israeli or go on the Palestinian side, despite the fact, according to surveys all over, Palestinians inside Israel keep deciding actively to stay and accept Israeli citizenship. On the other side, the fact that this blindness towards what it means to have a minority, I call it from one side our post-Nakba, our post-catastrophe trauma, still trying to cope on with what's going on after the Nakba. From the other side, I call it the post-Holocaust trauma, the feeling of still persecuted, threatened by other people. And this is preventing us from coming into the sphere of Israeli society as citizens and preventing the Israeli society to accept us also as citizens. The implications of this dual blindness, this dual trauma, is shown in education. The question, in contrast to the 3 other sections supervised and managed by the State of Israel, in terms of ultra-Orthodox education, secular Jewish education, and religious Jewish education, and the 4th is the Arab section of education. Unlike the 3 other Jewish sections, there is no vision of what the graduate of the system should look like. Is he or she a Palestinian, an Israeli, a Palestinian Israeli, an Arab Israeli? There is no question somewhere, and believe me, I have been looking for a definition of a vision of the system or the graduate of the system or the curricula or the system or the values guiding the system, what it means to be an Arab, a graduate of the Arab system of education in Israel. None. No question. It's not only that there's no answer, the question has not been asked. And the reflection of it in the history books, where you find an Israeli, Jewish, Zionist narrative, absolute absence, striking absence of the existence, I'm not using the word narrative, the existence of other people at that time, in that situation, under the circumstances, in that specific geography, when the establishment of the Jewish narrative was happening. the reflection of it in Arabic books, the fact that hardly 40% of all graduates of high schools in Israel, Arab high schools in Israel, end up high school with a decent bagrut, with a decent matriculation certificate. Only 12% go into Israeli higher education. 10,000 Israeli Arab students studying in Jordan and West Bank, and the list goes on and on. When it comes to the second implication, the fact that only 25% of all Arab women are participating in the workforce, mostly in low income. The average of young people in between ages 18 and 25 not working, not studying, goes up to 38%. Unemployed Arab men in between ages 40 to 60 are 45%. Percentage of families under poverty line 51. Kids under poverty line 61. And the list goes on and on. Economic disparity, a gap in between Arab economy in Israel and Israeli economy. Arab life equality and Jewish Israeli life equality. Two societies. One is living in the 21st century, another is still the highest, I believe, in the 13th century. And then you start believing or understanding or recognizing, why do you think there is tension between Arabs and Jews here? Why do you think Arabs are not participating fully in the democracy? Why democracy is not inclusive of Arabs in Israel? And it is, after all, the economy, the education, the values, the lifestyle, and the quality of life that is dividing two people. All of that was an introduction. Now, that introduction is the definition of the problem. I grew up to believe that public problems have private solutions. Years after I was kicked from school as a high school teacher who tried to change the world and failed, and then I started working at Al-Qasemi College, a college of teacher training established by Sufis, and reaching up to the highest level of provost and then head of the college, which is unlikely to happen in a setting of Bak al-Gharbi, where the hardcore of the Islamic movement and the Sufi movement are really thriving in this area. Years after I have been the Arab, niche Arab, token Arab in all the governmental committees all around, I decided, my solution is creating schooling models, private schooling models, taking my family savings, investing them. The voice of my husband in my head still, we are taking a risk here. Your vision, our savings. And then my vision won, by the way. The power of husbands. I decided 2006, I have finished my PhD working with Professor Michael Kramer around the identity of Arabs in the United States, comparing it to the identity of Jews and other minorities in the United States since the 19th century, and the literature written by all these minorities as a foundation research. And then it hit me. Now I know what should be done. Schooling in the basic, old-fashioned, old-school, teaching for ideas, teaching in a kind of intentional, transformative way. I started Q schools almost 10 years ago with the idea to use English language. To tell you a secret, hide within the English language to fix the identity problems within my society. I started with 30 kids that I recruited. My kids, 3, my sister's kids, my brother's kids, neighbors, all very shy not to join this new project. And now we're ended up with hundreds of kids and even thousands of kids a year. The idea of a Q school is this. Through the instruction of language, through the schooling, we are constructing a new narrative. A narrative of positive selfhood, of developing a critical thinking, developing self-communal leadership, taking responsibility and a sense of vision. From that big idea, it took me 2 years to start translating it into course books. Course books for preschoolers, age 2, where instead of teaching about professions, I teach about vision. Starting a book with a 2-year-old saying, I want to be. My vision is, my dream is, a girl to be a football player, a girl to be a scientist, a boy to be a leader, a girl to be a leader. And starting reconstructing a communal personal narrative through English language courses, through English language course books, through English language teaching practices inside the classroom. Q Schools has developed, it started as an afternoon school to avoid all the logistics and all the difficult processes of Ministry of Education. We started as an afternoon school. Then we started being invited by public schools to supplement their English language schools with our language schools. Other schools started taking our curricula instead of the Ministry of Education curricula. Speaking of the Ministry of Education curricula, I have to tell you one thing. The only Arab in the official course books of the Ministry of Education in English, I'm not speaking about Hebrew or Arabic, in English is Salim the kind Bedouin. For God's sake, all of us have camels. We have these small wooden camels we buy on the way to the Dead Sea, you know them? But I can't remember when was the last time I saw an Arab with a camel and a tent. A real one, not the... So it's very disappointing to see that the only representative token Arab in all the curricula of English written by native American, Jewish American writers, educators, is Salim the kind Bedouin. Very disappointing. So my books start with Amal. Amal is a name of a female meaning hope. Amal is a girl age 5. And she is the teacher. She has a room of her own. She has a clock to plan. And she has a day to teach. And she has values. And she is independent. This is my counter narrative of Salim the kind Bedouin. Q Schools has started also a preschool, a day preschool for ages 2 to 4. The only official English-speaking preschool, day-speaking English, day preschool, English-speaking, only one in the Arab sector, trying to educate for an intellectual elite, intellectual leadership inside the community. We started also developing a youth leadership center, sending Arab young people ages 13, 14, and above to delegations all over the world for youth conferences, Model UN conferences, and EU conferences, and also in American projects. We are working in the West Bank in Ramallah. We are working in Jordan and bringing the prophecy of what it means to be what I call the new Arab. A new Arab is an Arab who is aware of the complexity, aware of a space of identities clashing, not only in between each other, but inside each variable, the possibility of a growth from complexity, and the fact that only good, intentional, transformative, direct education is going to lead the way into community organization and also integration within the Israeli society.
I'd actually like to start with you, Micah. You know, you spoke about the complexities, you called it the perplexities of Zionism. I want to push you a little bit on that and really ask you, so what is your vision? Right? There are many complexities. We all feel it. Where do we go from here?
I realize you invited me to speak about my vision for Zionism, and I listened to myself speak, and I actually spoke about how all visions don't work anymore. So how's that to start the day with some good Zionistic optimism? So thank you for that question. I'll try to offer a thought. Israel has many, many problems. Our relationship with our minorities, relationship between the rich and the poor. A problem that troubles me a lot is the relationship between religion and state in Israel. That troubles me at least as much as the conflict, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict troubles me. Now, when I speak to many Jews around the world, which I understand is the majority here are not Israelis, who's here from outside of Israel? Okay. So I understand that one of the reasons why many young non-Israeli Jews feel embarrassed or disconnected from Israel is because of the monopoly that the Israeli that Orthodox rabbis have over Judaism in Israel. In broad strokes, I think it would be fair to say that there are two issues that trouble many of you. One is the occupation. Two is the monopoly of orthodoxy over Judaism in Israel. Because maybe your parents were willing to be supporters of Israel, while Israel doesn't consider your Judaism Judaism. So you should be a part of our country, but we don't see you as a part of our story. But that doesn't work with this generation. Let's put it this way. Maybe the double problem that American and not only American Jews have with Israel is that the Palestinians don't have enough rights. But Orthodox rabbis have too many rights. But here what I wanted to take from this talk is that maybe we should have a more subtle conversation about Israel. And I hope what you come out with is the following. The conflict with the Palestinians is very, very complicated. If we stay in the land, we're threatened. If we leave the land, we're threatened. If we stay, it's wrong ethically. If we leave, it's very, very complicated. The monopoly of rabbis over Judaism in Israel is not complicated. It's simply distorted. There's no catch here. It's not complicated. Now, the reason why I wanted to put this together, and again, I'm creating more problems and not offering an inspiring vision. Sorry. But maybe we could leverage the two in the following sense. Realizing that the Middle East is not a stable place. And that we don't really have an opportunity to create an long-going stable agreement in an area where we have nothing but stability. So maybe we could leverage this opportunity to do something else. See, there is one reason why Orthodox rabbis own Judaism in Israel. There is one reason. See, politically it's an enigma. They're a minority in Israel, and yet they are a majority on this issue. Why is that? It's because mainstream Israelis, we invest our political capital on the conflict. That's where we invest our political capital. And some of the ultra-Orthodox, they can invest their political capital on one issue and one issue only, guarding the distorted relationship between synagogue and state in Israel. What would happen if we stop investing our political capital on the conflict? And this is how it could look like. Here's something constructive that I finally want to offer. How about we create a treaty between the Israeli right and the Israeli left? And this is how the treaty looks like. A double freeze. For 10 years, we freeze all settlements. No more creating new facts on the ground. For 10 years. At the same time, for 10 years, we freeze all peace initiatives. Now you see, this is how a right-winger thinks. There's going to be peace, we have to build a lot of settlements in order to stop that peace. This is how left-wingers people feel. They're building so much settlements, pretty soon it will be too late. As quickly as possible, we have to reach a two-state solution. So we're playing chicken. So what would happen if we both agree on a freeze? Freeze of settlements, freeze of peace initiatives, and now for 10 years, we gain time. For 10 years, the issue that's separating right-wingers, the left-wingers, is off the table, which will enable left and right to unite on other issues. The main issue, we could start curing Judaism in Israel, liberating Judaism from a state that won't only cure the Israeli democracy. I think as a passionate Jew, that will also liberate Judaism itself.
So, very interesting idea. Dalia, you spoke a lot about how even with everything that's going on outside, the necessity of really strengthening the new Arab identity, as you called it. What's your opinion of Micah's idea in terms of the freeze? Would it be better to kind of create that freeze in order to focus inwards? Or are there significant things that can be done in order to advance the political process and kind of make progress outwards as well with our Palestinian neighbors?
I certainly agree. And I have to say something, Micah, that this is my first time hearing live
an Israeli Jew saying that we have to end the occupation and freeze building the settlements. I have been hearing it all over the news, indirectly said or voiced or on the pages of Haaretz, but never had this opportunity of hearing it live. And it meant a lot to me to hear it from here, the heart of Jerusalem. And this is the right thing to do if leadership is to be acted on a positive basis. Sometimes I have a feeling that in Israel, the leaders of Israel should go to basic leadership course. What is a vision? Or how do you pave the way towards a vision? The strength of the state of Israel, the health of the state of Israel, if we're speaking biologically of an organism, is depending so much on taking, I would say, external procedures such as the freezing of the settlements, but internal procedures of focusing on the inner texture of Israeli society. An inner texture of Israeli society is both Arab and Jewish. These are the cells making this body. And if one cell is deformed or ill, the whole body is ill. And the leadership is not recognizing that the body is ill. The body is ill, and even the body is explosive. Situation in Israel is explosive. As long as Israel is looking at expansion, insisting on being in the West Bank, it's not focusing on the fact that Arabs in Israel are actually a bridge in between Israel and the rest of the Middle East. They are part of the solution. And instead of seeing us as a community part of the solution, they are seeing us another level of the conflict, which is sad, which is not only not good for us as a community, it's basically not good for the state of Israel. It is the kind of the perpetuation of the conflict as the identity. The conflict became our identity and the Israeli identity and the Jewish identity. Jewish started to be a political word. Zionist a political word, Palestinian is a political word, Arab a political word, Israeli a political word. And we forgot that all of these identity terminology have values, positive values, have an essence, have a culture. We forgot that being us is also about culture, and we started focusing on defining our identity variables as political entities and, sadly, conflict entities. So I certainly believe, and you and I did not expect that we will agree. My impression was at the beginning that we will not, but I'm positively surprised that we're agreeing on many of the things, and basically on, conflict word should be eliminated and maybe revised into bridging word, and from there, let's start with the freezing.
So I wanna.
Can I say something of you, Mark?
Go ahead.
See, the issue of us controlling the West Bank doesn't trouble me as much as the West Bank controlling us.
And it is controlling us.
And the problem is that the conflict is controlling us. I don't know if we could end our control of the West Bank very quickly in a way that won't threaten Israelis. I think we should end the situation where the West Bank is controlling us. And I think my offer, this by the way is the first time I'm ever offering this publicly. I'm usually very quiet on these issues. Many people here never heard me speak about these issues. But if we try to create a manach chevratit chadasha, an Israeli treaty, where we both agree, all sides agree, for freezing settlements and freezing large peace initiatives. Let's not create irreversible facts on the ground for now, and by doing that, we're unleashing so much social and political energy that we can start investing inwards in our economy, our relationship with our minorities, relationship between synagogue and state, and starting to build Israel from bottom up. I think Palestine needs to be built from bottom up, but also Israel should be built from bottom up. Israel doesn't need to build Palestine, and Israel doesn't have to be controlled by Palestine. We both have to build ourselves from bottom up, and I think the offer of having a double freeze could we delay the major arguments and for now use the liberated political energy in order to repair and cure all the things that need our attention within Israel.
So let's So let's speak for a second about the internal fabric. And Dalia, you spoke about kind of the delicacy of Israeli society. And we speak a lot about minority and majority rights, but I actually want to throw in the famous speech that President Rivlin spoke about last year, and you've been involved a little bit in his initiative, about, for those of you who don't know, what he calls the Four Tribes speech. And the idea is basically that in the not so distant future, where Israel is actually becoming four separate tribes, right? It's no longer relevant to speak about minority and majority because we're on four simultaneous tracks: the Arabs, the Haredis, the national religious, the Tilumi, and the seculars. So my question to you is it still even relevant to speak about minority rights or integration into the majority, or how do we create that social fabric that ties together those four different tribes into one shared society, regardless of where your identity is?
Sometimes when I go into some discussions in the different committees I participate in, and I say Arabs and Jews in Israel, people say, but everything you speak about in between Arabs and Jews is also between Haredis and the seculars. And I say, no, sorry. I was in this committee last year where a Haredi woman spoke up, and she said, you know what? You are enforcing to the people organizing the committee. You're enforcing on us something that we're not sure we want. We have our schools, we have our values, we have our lives, and as a Haredi woman, she was very much protective of her environment, of her sphere, and this is not my narrative. I'm not protective of what's there. I am trying to aspire to what's not there, and that's the difference in narratives. Despite the growing numbers and the fact that each tribe is going to be a quarter of what it means to be Israeli, I still think the mentality and the complexity of minority is not a number thing. It's more into social structuring. It's a social structuring, and it's not about the numbers. It's about the rights. It's about the values. It's about the question is, what is Israeliness? Is there a definition of Israeliness? And is Israeliness inclusive of me and my religious neighbor? And is it inclusive of an Ethiopian? If it's inclusive of a Russian? If it's inclusive of anyone who has a different color, a different language, a different accent in Hebrew, or maybe does not know Hebrew? Is Israeliness inclusive of all of us? If we are going into four parallel tribes, I think there is no legitimacy of the existence of the State of Israel. But what makes it legitimate to continue to be a State of Israel is that along with the four tribal development, there must be a development of a vision of an Israeli society. Now, once upon a time, when there was a use of the word coexistence, which is not in fashion anymore, now they speak about shared society, they used to say Arabs and Israelis. And I started saying, guys, it's Arabs and Jews inside Israel. Now, if that terminology was there, and it's still going on, Arabs and Israelis, so where are the tribes?
I just want to jump in with one comment. I think when we think about generosity, we should try to educate ourselves and train our minds, not only to be generous people, but to have generous identities. And generosity, there's a strong connection between self-confidence and generosity. When you feel not secure, that's when you're not generous anymore. What? When you feel terrified, so you guard yourself. You can't be generous. Now, I think that comes to the same with identities. I'm saying as an Israeli Jew, the more confident I am as an Israeli Jew, the more generous as an identity and I could be with my narrative. So here, I think this is something that Israelis don't always understand. We think that in order to enable minorities to be a part of our narrative, we have to compromise our narrative. We have to somehow weaken our Jewish Israeli identity. I think it's the other way around. The more we deepen it, the more we feel strong and confident about a Jewish Israeli identity, the more we could be generous and with sharing our public space and our narrative with other identities.
Inner perspective of this identity generosity is that my analogy, if you're a poor person living in a wooden house and your neighbor has a villa, how would you feel? I think the security threat is the fact that you have a poor neighbor. So if you have the means and the resources to invest in making, creating some equal basis between you and your neighbor, you would secure your security, not only being generous. So the Jewish identity generosity would end up causing or creating security inside Israel. Now, my son who's 11, someone asked him yesterday, a guest in our home, so what do you want to be in the future? And he said, a pilot. Now, my mother jumped in saying, oh dear, his name is Siddiq. It's also kind of a Tzaddik, Jewish Arab kind of in-between name. She said, that's not possible, dear, my mother said. And then the guest who's a Jew said, that might be possible. In between, I was thinking, I want my kid to have this vision and to believe that he is able to fulfill this vision. And I want Israeli society to evolve in 10 years from now, enabling him to fulfill that vision. Imagine the situation where he can't and still has this vision. My older son now is more realistic about visions and what he wants to achieve in life because he's starting to learn the rules of the game. But I wish for my little one is to grow up into a future society where being an Arab pilot is possible and not a security threat or the enemy who's potentially going to explode the airplane. It's ridiculous to think about it when it's your kid saying that he wants to be a pilot, but you know what? There are so many cleaning that we have to do.
I want to speak for a minute about leadership. And there's a very strong sentiment today among Israeli society, and you hear it from within and from without, that there is a lack of political leadership, just a huge vacuum that exists. And I wanted to ask, one, do you agree with that? And if so, how do we make progress even when there is perhaps a political vacuum of leadership?
My view is that we don't have a problem of leadership. I mean, this nostalgia. We used to have a Ben Gurion. We used to have a Begin. There used to be a Churchill, a Roosevelt. And where did all these leaders go? So I have news for you. I think they're here. The Churchills, the Ben Gurions, they're all here. But we're not willing to accept them. Because you see, in today's political climates, when people make mistakes, so their mistakes are amplified in social networks. First of all, we know about mistakes very quickly. We used to know about mistakes 4 years later. Now it's 4 seconds later. Everything is very transparent. And every mistake is amplified. And then we want vengeance. We want that person that made that mistake to lose his job. If he doesn't lose his job, he's scored forever. If you lose once, you're a loser. If you screw up once, if you say something wrong, you're a fascist or you're a communist. And so we live in a world where leadership can't develop. I think the more now here's the thing. An unforgiving society that doesn't forgive people for saying the wrong thing or for making mistakes, is a society that creates paralyzed leadership. Because the best way not to make a mistake is not to do anything. So an unforgiving society paralyzes leadership. The problem is not our leaders, the problem is our society. I would say the more forgiving our society would be, the more daring our leadership could be. So when we think about leadership, it's not about cultivating the right individuals, it's about cultivating the right attitude.
I don't think there's a vacuum of leadership. I think there is leadership in the wrong direction. This direction, Jewish governmental, institutionalized leadership, wishing Arabs are away, not here, inside Israel at least, and still thinking of one direction. Arab leaders, official leaders of the Arab community inside Israel, and the political leaders Knesset members still in the second direction, wishing Israel would disappear, wishing Palestine would be freed, and in between that direction and that direction, opposite directions, in between there is a society. There are people living, Arabs and Jews, still trying to manage, still wishing to find the formula to coexist and live together or to share a kind of geographical statehood or whatever, and nobody is actually thinking about them. Our leaders are not thinking about us as a community inside Israel. The Jewish governmental leadership is not thinking about us as a community inside Israel. Two sides are thinking of one thing, the conflict between Palestine and Israel, which, excuse me for the bad word, it's not relevant to us living inside Israel as an Arab community to comment firsthand. What is relevant for me is that community organization from within Israel.
So, do either of you have political aspirations, changing the system from within?
I have educational aspirations. I believe in the power of education. When I see the kids growing now in 10 years from Q school and the girls going to places and have this confidence and they have a vision and they're pursuing what they believe in, and I grew up in a kind of a victim mentality. Kind of, it's they're to blame, it's because of them. We women blamed the men blamed the Jews blamed others. And we are grown up in minority inside minority, and it was hard to put your head above the water. And I try to educate for empowerment, self-empowerment, and not victim. That's a huge step. And when I see these confident kids growing in my schools, I say, this is what I should do. This is what I should continue doing.
What about you, Micah?
I think being a thinker is about developing ideas. Being a politician is about making decisions. I think I'm not good at making decisions. I hope I'm good in cultivating ideas. So I think I'll stay a thinker and not a doer.
Okay. Fair enough. So before we open it up for questions from you, I'd like to close this section with a short questionnaire inspired by James Lipman from inside the Actors Studio, for those of you who are familiar. I'll ask you a few questions. The idea is to answer in really short, instinct, one word or tops one sentence answers, and we'll just go back and forth. You ready? Okay. They didn't see these questions ahead of time. What is your favorite word? You, go ahead.
Shiri.
Shiri?
I think love.
What is your least favorite word?
Tzadkanut.
In English for
Righteousness.
righteousness. Yeah.
I think conflict.
What inspires you?
Mystery.
Women who did it.
Are you optimistic or pessimistic? Are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future of Israel?
I am ridiculously optimistic.
Me too. Radically optimist.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt doing? Obviously, politics is not one of them.
I would like to be a fashion designer.
A mountain climber.
Final question. If a heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the gate?
You were right.
It was worth it.
Your questions.
Hi, my name is Paula. I'm from the United States. I live in Jerusalem. I'm a filmmaker. I remarked to a friend that this was one of the most optimistic and inspiring conversations I've heard in a long time, so I really appreciate it. I wanted to offer a question or a comment and just see how you responded. I've heard an interesting idea floated around in Israel about a one-state solution in which there's no Palestinian state, there is just Israel in which everyone is treated equally. And Dalia, I was very struck by the way you described the new Arab and the way that you're using education as a model. And perhaps it's my own optimism, but I tend to agree with you that if equality and education is inserted not only into the Palestinian areas, but also into all of the Middle East, there perhaps is a chance. So the question is, what's your reaction to one Israel where everyone's equal in the vision that you described? Is that possible? And B, is it a problem to lose the Palestinian state if they're able to be this equality between everyone and really just a utopic society?
I'm not for a one-state solution. If you understood that I meant this, no. I am for a two-state solution. And I want to make the distinction again between Palestinians who are citizens of the State of Israel and Palestinians who are not citizens of the State of Israel. And I think that the Palestinians have a right to have their own state. I think equality is between the people who choose to be Palestinians, who choose to continue being citizens of the State of Israel. And perhaps you coming from outside Israel know or know less or not aware of the fact that Palestinians living inside Israel are living in their homes. They were, most of them, I am fourth generation, born inside Israel. And the lands and the villages and the houses and the farms and everything have been owned by their families for more than 100 years. So it's very complicated to say either one-state solution to people inside Israel, outside Israel, or Palestinians should go out. It's very, very complicated. But there must be a choice of where do you want to be. And we always say that we have no other land. This is our land, and we were born here, born both Palestinian, having a Palestinian heritage, and born into Israeliness. So this is the complexity that has to be cultivated, and the equal rights that have to be coming from here. So I think this is the basis of the argument. And this is a distinction. Usually Arab Palestinians inside Israel are an invisible group when the conflict is discussed in between Palestine and Israel. And this is a mistake that is repeating itself all over.
My name is Sonia Weiss. I'm from Mexico City. And my question is, I agree that politics has been, ambushed by, internal politics has been ambushed by the conflict. And the freeze idea is very interesting. I just wonder what will happen to the Palestinian voice, what will happen to Palestinian progress, Palestinian dignity in those 10 years when the freeze occurs. How do you deal with that?
There has to be three sides to this deal. It's a deal between Israelis and between those Israelis and Palestinians. And during those 10 years, we focus internally, they focus internally. During these 10 years, we strengthen the nature of our democracies. And then 10 years later, we can meet. And when we're both more confident, then we can be more creative when we figure out how to take the conflict to a peaceful solution.
Hi, Tammy Reese from the States. My question is, I think you touched on something really important, which is that there's a lack of trust, but it's two-sided and probably multi-sided. So if there is a 10-year freeze, what could be done on both sides? I'd love to hear from both of you. What actual things, what policies, what programs could be started that would repair trust or create trust?
Okay, I want to offer a broad framing for our problem. The conflict has so many layers. It also has an emotional layer. And the small amount of time I have, I just want to offer one insight into this. I'll speak very honestly. The dominant emotion that Jewish Israelis have towards Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza is that they're afraid of them. We're afraid. If you're in a bus and it's too hot and you see a Palestinian next to you and he's wearing a heavy coat, you feel afraid. I've read some research that the dominant emotion that Palestinians from the West Bank feel when they see a Jew, they feel humiliated. They feel patronized. And this conflict is many things, but it's also what happens when fear meets humiliation. Now here's what happens. Because I'm afraid of the Palestinians, I overcheck them in airports. I overcheck them in checkposts. Meaning because I'm afraid of them, I humiliate them. And because I humiliate them, that creates a climate that cultivates hate, that leads to do things that will make me even more afraid of them and humiliate them more. And you understand where this is going. It's cyclical. Is it possible to break that cycle? I think eventually, our generation can't make peace. But I think the next generation can make peace, and we have to make room for the next generation to be born. If we could create a generation of young Israelis that never suffered terror, and a generation of Palestinians that were never humiliated because of occupation, then that generation could make peace. Biblically speaking, transitions take 40 years. We need our Dor Midbar. We need our generation of desert, generation of transition, a generation of Israelis that when they see Palestinians, their first impulse is not fear, and Palestinians, their first impulse is not being humiliated, and then that generation might be able to make peace. All we could do, all we should do, is not bring peace, but bring the generation that could bring peace. Is that okay?
Dalia?
Does that make sense? The reason why I'm asking, this is one of the first times I'm bringing out my ideas publicly, so I just want to know if I'm, What?
Inside Israel, trust should be built in between Israeli Palestinians and Israeli Jews is simple in my perspective. Making higher education and good education accessible to Arabs, first of all. Because once Arabs and Jews in Israel do not meet, they have separate schools, they have separate employment places, they have separate, now they meet in the malls, but they don't really interact. Access to good education, the right education, access to higher education, shared employment, shared spaces of employment, and this is how you gain the trust. As long as there are gaps in economy and education and values in between Arabs and Jews inside Israel, I think trust will not be established.
So as the Americans would sum it up, separate is never equal.
Perfect segue to my question. My name's Sarah. I'm from the States. My constitution says that separate is inherently never equal. And as someone who's working in the education field in the US, I agree. And so I have 3 questions. One is which, do you think that the 4 different schools is a good idea? 2, are your schools, as I've been to Inprat, are your schools secretly meeting each other? And 3, what are some practical things you're doing in your schools to heal some of the trauma within your community?
Practical thing that I do is everything that I do is trying to bring up a new generation of Arab kids and youth who believe they can do it and who believe that they want to develop and they want to access higher education and they're not a victim of themselves or others, and develop into that. That's the healing I'm creating, and I'm creating it through a lot of leadership and positive thinking and mentorship programs from level preschool level up to university level. Parallel to that, I employ both Arab and Jewish teachers. So you can imagine a situation where a Jewish teacher is teaching Arab kids in an Arab town. That's a lot of healing for him or her, and for the kids to have this kind of interaction. A third thing that I do is we have also a program of Arab and Jewish youth programs. Where Arab and Jewish young people meet and talk around everything. And we have a mural art program. We have a music program, public speaking program in English for Arab and Jewish. So we do a lot of things. Like our work inside the Q schools is a kind of multi-layered program where we have investment in us, in our kids, in terms of the values and skills suitable to the life in the 21st century. On a parallel basis, we have investment in knowing the other and letting the other know us, which is a lot of bringing Jewish teachers and Jewish Arab youth programs.
Very briefly, I want to quote American philosopher John Dewey. He describes which kind of a personality can become a bridge. And he says a bridge is a person that understands a foreign language as a mother tongue. Let me say this again. Foreign language as a mother tongue. That means it's those rare human beings that have the ability that when they listen to you, they're not understanding you using their own categories, but they're listening to you using your categories. I'm understanding you on your terms, on your categories. I think in order to build bridges, we need leaders that could become bridges. People that understand the multiple languages. That's what we're trying to do at Ein Prat. I think in a very deep sense, that's what ROI is trying to do. And these are the kind of individuals that do not lose who they are, but they can understand also and explain to others who others are. That's the kind of glue. The glue is a new brand of leadership that could start building a much more passionate and yet better conversation.
We're going to take 2 final questions. Please be brief.
Hi, I'm Roy. I'm from here. I work for UJ Federation of New York. And I just want to thank you, first of all, not only for this words of wisdom, but only for this huge lesson that when we first saw you, it was so obvious that you'll share the opposite. You'll be a complete opposite to one another. And then once you talked, it's very clear that you share a parallel journey, that both of you come from the religious old institutions and you create your own breakthrough and you create these amazing practical solutions and you choose to implement them through religious institutions like the Sufi academic, which is so spiritual, or in Pratt, who is leading the Jewish renewal in Israel. And I think it's amazing, and I just want to hear about your own journey. And if I have to be extra short, do you feel alone? Do you feel there's a movement of people going through the old institution, through the old religious institution toward new solutions through spirituality, or is it just the two of you?
So we'll take the final question, and then perhaps you can address both of them together and kind of close.
Okay. Hi, I'm Maxine Bodesazin from New York, and Micah, you talked a little bit about young international Jews not being engaged for a couple reasons in Israel. So my question is about whether it's young international Jews or even young Jewish Israelis, Arab Israelis. Is it the same problem here within Israel? What can we do to be more involved? Are there any examples of things, aside from, of course, ROI, that have worked? And, you know, all 3 of you are welcome to answer.
So I'll try to answer both questions in some kind of manner. What makes me, you asked me, and also you asked before why am I said we're both very optimistic about Israel. Here's why. I don't feel alone. I don't feel alone. I feel that in Israel, it's probably true in many places in the world, but I speak for Israel and about Israel. We have the following problem, that extreme people having extreme voices that separate us, they also have extreme passion. But most people are not extreme. They're very moderate. The problem is they also have very moderate passion. As a result, most people are very moderate, but most passion is very extreme. So being moderate, searching for bridges, that's not something new. You don't feel alone. I think what's new that's happening is that we're starting to feel that moderate Israel, middle ground Israel, that Israel is trying to make connections and not separations, is starting to achieve passion. And I think Israel will start hearing itself when moderate people will have extreme passion. When the passion that today is trapped in the extreme parties, in the extreme parts of Israel, will have people that are radically passionate with their very moderate views. That's when Israel will start hearing itself, and I see this every day. This is something that's happening. This is a momentum that's being gained in Israel.
It's when I think about it, like what I do is what I think about. My vision is very much practically reflected in what I do. So I think and I talk and I do the same thing. I'm really very much expected, predictable person. I have like 2,000 kids, which means 2,000 families joining my schools in Israel and in Jordan and Palestine each year, which means I am not alone. But when it comes to the support level, I'm very much alone. Being an Arab Muslim woman inside Israel and starting a new schooling or a new idea or a new practice is a very problematic place to be in. The question of reliability. The community looks at you because it's a traditional and the Muslim women have not been in the leadership position. They look at you and they say they're not sure how long this is gonna continue or how sustainable it is. So it has been sustainable for 10 years and it will be for more. On the Jewish side also they look at you and they're very much disappointed that you're not matching the stereotype. So they're also waiting for you to prove that you are a fake kind of an Arab, kind of a person hiding something, and you're not the real Arab that they wish to see, which is a covered in black Muslim woman who is very much paralyzed and not doing anything. So in between these two perspectives, I find myself fighting for everything. Fighting for approval of my preschool, fighting for another budget for my Q school, fighting for another project, going into that and that and that. And basically my support comes from outside Israel. And basically my support is coming from Jews in America who look from outside and they have the objective eyes to see what's going on. And also I started having new friends, Palestinian Americans, who also have a real intention, a real will, like a real agenda of investing in people from inside Israel from a positive perspective. I have to say something about, from my personal experience about this Palestinian in Palestine and occupation things. I have to tell you, there are a number of Palestinians from Palestine, Palestinian authorities studying inside Israel in higher education institutions. I have been involved in international school in Kfar Hayarok in Tel Aviv, where we recruited 12 kids from Palestine studying inside Israel. I know a lot of my friends, and I work a lot with many partners, Palestinian partners, whose kids were educated in America and the UK. And believe me, the higher the level goes up, you find people who are willing to find solutions and not the conflict. Usually when you think of Palestine and Israel and occupation, you imagine the frustrated poor people willing to explode themselves at any time. And they have nothing to lose. Their life is already exploded, has already exploded. But this is not the only group there. So investment in life, exactly this, in economy, giving people bread and giving people education is the right thing to do from within Israel or outside Israel.
Last sentence, Micah.
One sentence?
One, but only one.
So I'll use it to make a pitch, okay? To make a pitch. Because I just came out with this idea, I just want to make my last thing. So if we freeze settlements for 10 years, freeze peace initiatives for 10 years, as a result, we freeze that passionate disagreement for 10 years. And that will make room for new conversations and for new passion to be born. So for us to look at other problems that we desperately need to take care of. So,
I think the underlying theme that comes out from this discussion is that there are huge challenges facing the state of Israel, but there's also huge optimism, and we are not alone. And I think the question to each and every one of us is, what is our role and what can we do from where we sit in our position in order to shift perspectives and create bold visions for the future. So thank you both for this conversation.
all right.